Jai Hind, friends. I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon. A lot has been said and asked about the Rashtriya Rifles. This is a crack counterinsurgency and counter-terror force operating in Kashmir Valley and also in Jammu. Ladies and gentlemen, RR has been called by many, including my guest today, as the Indian military's most successful experiment. But now there are talks, there are opinions about what the future of RR will be or should be. It's a great honor and privilege to invite to this program Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former GOC, 15 Corps. Sir, Jai Hind, and a very warm welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you for this invitation to your show, and Jai Hind to all our viewers.
So I start off by asking you, sir, why was the RR raised? A lot of people don't know, and they say that, the Indian Army was already there, and the Indian Army had a lot of experience in Operation Pawan in Sri Lanka. It had a lot of experience in low-intensity conflict in the northeast, sir. So when we look at the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir state, minus Ladakh, sir, why was a need felt by the government and the army to raise this force in the first place?
Very good question to start with, Gaurav. And may I say, I think we'll have to take our minds back to 1989 or so. Very correctly quoted by you. We had a lot of experience in low-intensity conflict. The Punjab situation was festering, although the army had not yet really been deployed, but was being made ready to be deployed at that time. There was a common perception that CI operations, counterinsurgency operations, takes up troops in a completely different dimension of war. They need a different kind of a training, and that they have to deal with people, and they're not really trained for it. The army is really not trained for it. The infantry has to undergo a complete change of force ethos, and that dilutes their overall capability to operate in the conventional domain. So it was felt that instead of having units rotating out of CI operations and coming back into conventional operations, etc., why not have a dedicated CI force as such? It was with this thought that this idea was born. And let me tell you that initially, no one thought that this force is going to be a regular force, right? In the sense, everyone was looking at re-employment opportunities for ex-servicemen, older people, slightly. You don't require to go into such a strenuous kind of activity. CI was considered to be less strenuous, and they felt that it would give good opportunities for re-employment to our soldiers, etc. And with this kind of a force, a quasi-regular force, we'll be able to fight militancy, insurgency, or terrorism everywhere. So, but an evolution took place when the decision was taken finally. First of all, we got to credit General B.C. Joshi, who was the DG MO, Director General Military Operations at that time. And under him, Brigadier Dhillon, Dhillon, who was later on the Corps Commander of 15 Corps also. He was one of the main people who actually negotiated this with the government, etc. The organization of it, etc. It all came up there. But it evolved. Initially, was supposed to be a re-employed kind of a force, but that did not materialize. It became a regular force, a contribution. It became under the overall composite tables of the army, manning tables of the army. This became an additional force, which meant that it would be disbanded when the need was felt. And it needed a mandate to be renewed I think it was every 3 years or so. So that system still continues. That mandate has to be renewed from time to time. 36 battalions were raised in the first Corps. 36 battalions altogether. Yeah.
Sir, about the effectiveness and the organization of Rashtriya Rifles, I would request you to shed some light on this and how is this force over a period of time been made more effective, especially with its organization and especially with, every regiment contributes troops to the RRs. There are Garhwali RRs and there are Kumaoni RRs and Sikh and Sikhlai and Mahar and everybody. So how does it all function? So how does it come together?
Thank you. I think progressively a very fine question to reveal the right things. Incidentally, I speak from experience because I have been a part of the Rashtriya Rifles and been very proud of wearing the Rashtriya Rifles badge. But to come back to the specific question itself, one of the main things in this which needs to be known is that initially there was no system of regimental affiliation, etc. It was battalions were to be just numbered. There was nothing like one Jack Rif or two Garhwal rifles. There were one RR, two RR, three RR, four RR. It was continuous like that. Also, the other thing to be known is that the idea of deploying this in Jammu and Kashmir did not even arise in the beginning. It was initially thought that a few battalions should be created for Punjab, deployment in Punjab, because the Punjab insurgency was at a high pitch at that time. But then suddenly in 1990-91, things changed around, particularly after the Rubaya Saeed kidnapping, after the incidents of 19th of January 1990, when Kashmiri Pandits were evicted. After that, that is the time when the decision was taken that instead of Punjab, we need to push this force into the valley. Incidentally, one sector of the RR was also in the northeast. It was located in the northeast, the 8th sector RR. And it only came to the Kashmir Valley in 1999 at the height of the Kargil crisis, when lots of troops had to move out from North Kashmir to Kargil. That is the time we were short of troops, and 8th sector RR with 3 of its battalions moved in. At that time, I was myself a part of the RR in the valley. Now, as far as organizational, I think we need to bless Brigadier Dhillon, General Dhillon, because it is his idea that this battalion, the battalions of the RR should not be like infantry battalions. They should not be 4 company based, which means essentially 800 bodies. They wanted to make them much bigger, and he negotiated and ensured it. So you found RR battalions 1,100 strong, more than 1,100 strong, and 6 companies worth. Now, the structure of a battalion organization, in the sense, structure means where does the manning come from? Most of it is 55% of the manning is by infantry units, infantry regiments. And then each such battalion has got an affiliation to a regiment from where the infantry manpower comes, and to a particular arm like artillery, air defense, engineers, or the armored corps. And so about 22% of that, of the strength of the battalion comes from that arm, who are now coming into an infantry counterinsurgency role. And besides that, rest of it is of logistics. So you have ordnance, you have EME, you have a workshop, small workshop with you, you have medical, and you have some Jack allied people who are attached to you. So it's a composite whole, very well put together, very well thought out, and evolved over a period of time. The best part, the last part here in this response, the best part about this was that each battalion got affiliated to a regiment. For example, 36 RR of the Garhwal Rifles, right? 13 RR of your regiment, the Kumaon regiment, right? 55% strength is from the Garhwal Rifles and 36 RR. Similarly, 55% strength in 13 RR is from the Kumaon regiment.
Yes, sir.
And then 36 RR has got artillery affiliation. I think 13 RR has got an armored corps affiliation. And I'm not sure about that, but that is how the battalion is made up. And tremendous spirit de corps, all put together under various light division headquarters. Victor Force at Avantipur, you have the Kilo Force in Sharifabad, Delta Force in Doda, and similarly like that. And total of 15 sectors equivalent to brigades. These are all very light headquarters, no artillery, etc. Only just the main signal component which is there with them.
So the Rashtriya Rifles has been called a military experiment, hugely successful. It's also a force multiplier, sir. How did this come to pass? And also, how do the people of Jammu and Kashmir relate to the Rashtriya Rifles? Because the RR is everywhere, sir. And they work very closely with the population. So that's what I wanted to ask you, sir. How have they ensured that this is actually a force multiplier, and how do they relate to the people of J&K?
See, Gaurav, every weakness which was there with the deployment of regular infantry in counterinsurgency operations, that weakness has been overcome. Now, one of the major weaknesses was the fact that an infantry battalion, first of all, occupied a much smaller area because it had a maximum of a 4-point deployment. That is 3 companies in 3 points, and a company and the battalion headquarters in the 4th point. With the RR coming in, you could have a 6-point deployment, right? So your area became much bigger. The grid system of counterinsurgency deployment, your grid became much larger. Second thing, intelligence. You see, infantry battalions came for a year and a half, 2 years, rotated here and there between different formations. So they never got their roots into that area in which their responsibility was. So the intelligence flow was, well, marginal. The biggest advantage of RR is they have come there, they are permanent there. The unit does not rotate. It's not that 36 RR is today in somewhere in South Kashmir and after 3 years it is located in Jaisalmer. No. My unit, 4 Garhwal rifles, can be in Pulwama, and 3 years later it can be in Jaisalmer. But 36 RR remains where it is. It is the men who keep rotating. So you'll find at any time, there are 1,100 bodies, at any time you'll find a rotation taking place. There is some people who are going and some people who are coming. And the system is very clear. Those who have to come, who have to relieve, come in first. So that at no time is an RR battalion ever under strength. It is full strength. Being permanently located where they are, they've got great outreach with the people. The tentacles are out. Intelligence sources are virtually permanent. And the most important thing, the kind of understanding with the local police, the local administration, the local clergy, the youth out there, the kind of programs that they undertake on Sadbhavana and things like that, all this is, ownership of that area is taken. Now, in any operation environment, Gaurav, you'll agree that if a unit takes full ownership of its area of responsibility, the effectiveness is much, much higher. And the rapprochement with the people, outreach with the people is felt more from the heart. So that is the prime reason why the Rashtriya Rifles has been found to be so effective in the valley or in other areas of Jammu where they have been deployed.
So, which naturally brings me to the next question, sir, that since Rashtriya Rifles is such a great force and, they've had fantastic results in the Kashmir Valley, sir. You very rightly said, sir, whether it's with the local government officials or the clergy or the youth, the Rashtriya Rifles is always up to something, and it's not just hard power, sir. It's also soft power, projection of soft power and all these things. I wanted to know, sir, do you always, or do you think that there would be a future where Rashtriya Rifles could be employed for conventional operations also? There was some talk a few years back about them moving up to the LC, etc., because these are highly trained troops, they know the terrain, and a flexibility of movement, that if you think that lesser pressure is required in the hinterland, maybe you can move them up and then bring them back or something. Do you feel that they should also be doing conventional operations?
Right, Gaurav. The fact that this force has now come to be so experienced over the last over 30 years now, and the troops are not permanent, but there's an institutional effectiveness, there's an institutional memory. And therefore, the unit is known to, by its efficiency overall. The system gets developed into a very efficient kind of a system. Secondly, they are forever in operations. They are ready for contact at all times. Most of the soldiers have been through various contacts, so they know how to respond to fire, how it is. You see, one of the basic issues of military ethos is, how do you respond to someone firing at you with anger? That is a very, very important aspect. You got to remember that your response has to be effective enough against a live fire coming on you. Most RR people are experienced on this. So there was a time when it was felt that why not make use of them for quasi-conventional operations? Maybe not offensive operations and that kind of a thing, but quasi-conventional operations. And therefore, this capability was recognized and given to the RR. And some units of the RR were deployed then in certain areas where there was heavy infiltration threats. They're very, very good at night work and things like that. So some of these were, and they've done very, very well on the LC. Wherever they have been deployed in counter-infiltration kind of a role, they've done extremely well. Besides that, of course, the point must be remembered that our adversary has got a very large number of paramilitary units. This frontier corps on the Western Front with Afghanistan, they were, my memory, 118. I've been told that there are many more now SC units which have been raised. Their effectiveness has gone up because of the experience they've gained. They are the RR of the Pakistan Army. And they are also being experimented by deployment in regular operations where they relieve the regular infantry. And then the regular infantry can be put together to create offensive forces. So keeping that in mind, the RR here also, in our case, is also being looked at for this particular role. And I think this role really essentially is a force multiplication. Besides that, the RR is one of the best forces for what is called rear area security. Remember, Gaurav, the wars which we have fought with our Western adversary, mostly the Western adversary has almost always looked at people orientation. You know, creating a number of saboteurs, people who are involved with rear area chaos, creating, straddling roads here and there, trying to get the people to rise up against the army. Is this kind of a strategy which has always been looked at. The RR is the ideal organization, the ideal unit to regiment or a set of troops to actually undertake operations to ensure rear area security. And now, with our very extended lines of communication stretching up to Ladakh, eastern Ladakh, and places like that, the RR is a natural kind of a force to ensure this kind of security.
So you mentioned that RR is not a permanent force, and there is talk that its mandate may not be renewed. Do you think that this is also because people feel that terrorism is down, it's largely under control, there are individual hits that are happening, but we don't see those kind of operations where, massive cordon and search and 5-7 terrorists in a house and firing and encounter going on for 2-3 days. That is largely stopped, if not absolutely, sir. Now, individual hits are taking place, whether it's against J&K police or the Hindu community there. What is your view, sir? Do you feel RR should stay? Is RR still relevant in spite of the lowering graph of terrorism and almost negligible stone pelting?
See, Gaurav, the concept of CICT operations is not just the targeting of the terrorist to kill or reduce the number of terrorists. It is to ensure that you take apart the system, the complete networks, so that terrorism does not raise its ugly face again. We have achieved a tremendous success in Jammu and Kashmir over the years. Particularly last few years, we have achieved a lot of success. But this is a dynamic situation, which means one success of yours will ensure that there will be 5 attempts from the other side to push back. This is exactly what is happening in the valley today, if you see. A pushback against you to try and make sure that you cannot announce your final victory. You can't say, I have now finally won this conflict in Jammu and Kashmir, this proxy conflict. This attempt to push back, soft targets, etc., this will continue for long. And the notion that people generally have is that if there is no violence, there is peace, there is stability. We have won the conflict. That's the worst notion to go by in this understanding of these operations. The absence of violence is never peace, right? The absence of violence accompanied by the complete dismantling of all the networks which ensure or enable terror. That is what peace is. The Rashtriya Rifles today is doing what I would call, metaphorically, I would call it holding the periphery. This is exactly what happened in Ireland, Northern Ireland, also when the British Army took a back step and negotiations took place and economic activity went up. See, this is exactly what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir today. Politically, you're trying to resolve it, you're trying to bring in development, you're trying to bring in economics and social engagement and things like that. The other side is attempting to make sure that you don't do it. All this does not succeed. Your engagement with the people does not succeed. Your economic development does not succeed. Tourism, 1 million people have come into the valley. This should not happen in the future. This is what the intent of your adversary is. The RR's presence in the grid ensures the prevention of the initiatives which the adversary can take. And you may not kill a terrorist for 6 months, for a year, but your presence there, your domination, your patrolling will ensure that your adversary does not raise the ugly head of terror in these areas. Which is why I always say it is premature to think that the conflict in Jammu and Kashmir is over. Yes, you've made some great strides. You've taken some great political initiatives, the removal of Article 370, the reaching out to the people that you're attempting to do, etc. But you've seen the pushback with the manner in which the Hindu minority, Muslims who do not agree with political Islam, etc., are being targeted. And if you don't take enough action, if your grid is weak, you will find a resurgence and return of terror. That must not happen. And for that, the Rashtriya Rifles must stay put on the grid. Some of the Rashtriya Rifles unit can always be used for conventional. You can experiment with them. 1, 2, 3, 4 units can always move out for rear area security experiments, or moving towards the line of actual control or the line of control, anywhere like that. That will keep rotating and giving them some additional exposure. But the RR mandate must remain, and this is a very, very important aspect based upon experience that I'm talking about.
So my last question to you is, sir, about Sadbhavna. Now, just for the viewers, Sadbhavna is, it's like a hearts and minds initiative of the Indian Army in Kashmir, and you go out with the people, you meet people, and there are schools that the army is running, there are cultural activities, reach out to the clergy, to the youth, like General Hasnain mentioned. So viewers, this is, Sadbhavna is massive. I'm just saying a few lines to give you the gist of what Sadbhavna is. Sadbhavna is a massive initiative which has been taken up by the Indian Army. Sir, my question is that I spoke to a few people, sir. I was in the valley recently, sir. 3 days back I was there, and a lot of people felt, even outside the army, that they said that the army is the last argument of the state. And if the Rashtriya Rifles is exposed too much to the civil public, sir, that cutting edge goes away, because then that factor of the unknown, sir, that factor of the unknown, I'm speaking from a terrorist point of view, because the local terrorists would come from within the population, sir, and the FTs would come from across. My question to you is, sir, do you feel that while Sadbhavna must be done, because there are obviously very good results accruing out of Sadbhavna, sir, so you cannot do away with Sadbhavna, but do you feel somebody else should do Sadbhavna and not the Rashtriya Rifles? Maybe some units, army units in the hinterland could do it, maybe the police could do it, the CRPF could do it. I think it's also because the army tends to do things very well, sir, in a clinical manner with a level of perfection. That is why Sadbhavna responsibilities also rest. And it's an Indian Army initiative anyway, sir. So what do you feel, sir? Is too much of Sadbhavna blunting the edge, or there are too many benefits out of Sadbhavna and we should continue as is?
Very good question. Got a very good question. I don't think this has really been answered by anyone in the past to that extent. Let me just delve into this. Firstly, Sadbhavna is absolutely required. Whether it is required in the manner in which it was evolved at the beginning in 1997, or should it change, that's the debate in our minds. Sadbhavna has to be there because principally counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist operations always involve a softening of the blow with the population so that the population does not get affected. The iron fist in the velvet glove, which General J.J. Singh used to always talk about. So principally it is there. In the heyday, in the late 90s, early part of the millennium, we went deeply into Sadbhavna because the civil administration was not in a position to move out There were so many terrorists, there was such a intense violence activity all over the valley that was not possible for the administration to do its outreach to the people and do its development work. The army then undertook a lot of that responsibility, particularly in the border belt, many other areas. But today, the situation is much better and the civil administration is more confident. They are moving out everywhere. The police is more confident. The CRPF is confident. So I think the army's role in development activities of the kind which the civil administration is involved in can take a back step to some extent. But there are 3-4 domains which no one can do as well as the RR. First is education. And this is across the board, regular units and RR both do it. We've got 43 goodwill schools in Jammu and Kashmir, each better than the other. And the local population just loves it. They love it. The kind of efficiency with which these institutions are run. They're all now virtually self-financing institutions as such. The rule position was that we were supposed to be handing over these institutions to the civil administration. But the people's demand was that please let this remain with the army, because it is the army's efficiency which ensures that these schools remain so well run. That is the first thing. Second is medical. The army's medical outreach is tremendous, and kudos to the Army Medical Corps for what they do. You have medical bricks being available to them. They demand these medical bricks and they go and lay out a camp. And particularly those who would never get a chance to look at medical specialists, gynecologists, there are cataract operations which are going on there, skin specialists, all kinds of people. This kind of a thing the government may wish to do, but can't do with that kind of passion that the RR does. And lastly, national integration efforts. The tours that are being organized, it can be undertaken by many others. CRPF is doing it also today. BSF is also doing it. But the RR, with this large presence, does it extremely well. Taking the people out to see, showcase the rest of India. See, this is what India is. This is the progress that India has made in the last 7, 8, 10 years. Look at Mysore, look at Bangalore, look at Jaipur, Agra, and many times spiritually also older people are taken to Ajmer Sharif and taken to Nizamuddin Aulia and things like that. This very hearts and minds exercise is a tremendous opportunity that the RR gets to reach out to the people. I'm not saying it's an exercise in intelligence gathering. It's an exercise in ensuring not even just winning hearts and minds. It is just remaining engaged with the population. You can't be isolated from the population. And therefore, I think Sadbhavna just needs a tweaking. It needs a relook. And the engagement aspect of it must be enhanced. It's not the material benefit so much as the engagement aspect which needs to be enhanced.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. And it was a great conversation. I learned so much. Ladies and gentlemen, with Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, he spoke about the origins of the Rashtriya Rifles. Why was the RR created? Can it operate not just in the hinterland, which is the rear areas, but also along the line of control? Then he spoke about the effectiveness and the organization of the Rashtriya Rifles and why Sadbhavna remains important, because in a CICT, counter-insurgency and counter-terror environment, because you're operating within the public, you need to remain engaged with the public. That is how it is. On behalf of all our viewers, sir, we once again thank you. And sir, there has been a lot of demand since I was traveling. People said, General Saab, kab wapis aa rahe hain? So sir, I'm going to trouble you again very shortly, sir. And thank you so much once again for joining us, sir. Jai Hind.